back to the ECG. So what is the diagnosis here? Is this a lead fracture? Is this a battery depletion? Is this a sensing problem, or is this a programming error? So is this a lead fracture? Is this a battery depletion, sensing, or a programming error? This one. Can we have the poll here? So we'll just take a good 30 seconds for you all to see the ECG, and we'll see what's the outcome of the poll. So we'll know what is the understanding of the people, how many of them have actually got it right. Okay. So this is a single chamber pacemaker implanted. And just want to know that what is wrong with this patient. Obviously, it looks like there's something wrong. So this one, some of the complexes are capturing, some are not. So what is the likely problem? Okay. So we'll take a good 30 seconds, and then we'll see the poll results.
I'll start the poll in some 10 seconds, sir.
Yeah. So this is the options. Okay. So after another 10 seconds, we'll stop the poll.
It actually is a 1 minute poll, sir, because that is the minimum time.
Yeah, fine, no problem. Okay. Can you keep the poll options to the side, because let them see the ECG? Hello?
The participants can change it, sir. They can take the poll on a side.
Okay, fine. That's fine. All right, no problem. So what are the poll results, Deepak?
Yeah, I'll show, sir. So,
no answer in majority, is it?
Yeah, this is the poll result, sir. No answer in 145 out of 257, and majority, I think, answer are almost loss of capture and under sensing are equal.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Good. I mean, let's see. Okay. So I think, this is what paged ECGs does to most of us. It's intimidating. We fear when we see a paged ECG because, it looks very intimidating, and, we're pretty much on the back foot even before we started, and we're not sure how to interpret it. But this is not the case. If you approach paged ECGs in a systematic manner, and if you try to reason out what's happening, the answer is very, very simple. So we'll get back to the ECG towards the end of the lecture, and we'll see how many of you get it right then. Okay. So, this is the basic functioning of a pacemaker. Pacemaker has two functions, not just one function. Most of us think that pacemaker's only function is to pace. That is wrong. Pacemaker does two things diligently. One, it senses every heartbeat, and second, it paces whenever required. That's very, very important. The function of a pacemaker is a backup pacing. So, what it does is it stays inside the heart, the lead. It monitors each and every heartbeat. So suppose the intrinsic conduction system fails, then only there is a pacing. So, for that to happen, for it to pace only when required, it has to sense the intrinsic conduction system very, very well. So sensing is a very important part of the pacemaker. And that gets us to another point that, pacing might not be required all the time. Only when the intrinsic conduction system fails, then you'll require pacing. That's why sometimes in patients with the pacemaker, you might not actually see any pacing happening, because the intrinsic conduction system may be okay at that point of time. And you have to remember that many of these conduction system diseases, like sinus node dysfunction or even AV blocks for that matter, may be intermittent. So on some days you have good intrinsic conduction, and then pacing might not be required. On other days, suddenly the sinus node fails or the AV node fails, and then in those days the pacing should be there. So the basic function of the pacemaker is that to sense what the intrinsic heart rate, and whenever there is sensing failure or there's no intrinsic conduction, to make sure that there's a backup pacing going on. Okay. So this is a basic, simple, pacemaker system. So, this is a single chamber pacemaker. It contains, I'll just use the laser pointer. So it contains a battery which is implanted, and then there's a wire which is inserted into the muscle, which is touching the muscle, either with a screw or without a screw. So what happens is the battery generates a voltage or electricity, and that voltage drives down electrons through this lead, okay, which is nothing but the current, drives down the current through this lead, and then it captures the muscle. So there is a minimum voltage, which we call as a threshold voltage. The battery should generate a minimum voltage for capture to occur. If the voltage is too less, muscle capture won't occur. Okay, so that is called as a threshold voltage. Okay, second thing, so you realize that if you see what could be the reasons for a failed ECG or a failed pacing ECG, or why a pacemaker would fail. One of the reasons would be the battery is depleted. It doesn't generate enough voltage, and it doesn't generate enough voltage a number of times. So routinely we set pacing systems to 60 beats per minute or 80 beats per minute to mimic physiological heart rate. So once a battery fails, it doesn't generate the necessary voltage to create a capture. So you'll find the non-capture. You'll find spikes which are not being captured. Second thing, what you realize is when the battery fails, the heart rate comes down, the pacing rate, whatever you set. The battery, there's not enough voltage to generate that many number of beats. So the rate might not be 80 what you set. It might be much lesser than that. So that's one of the reasons for a pacemaker system failure. The second reason would be if there's any problem with the lead. So if the lead gets displaced, doesn't touch the muscle, which is common immediately after implant in 1% of the cases, again, whatever current you're generating doesn't reach the muscle, because it's a displaced system. So unless it reaches the muscle, there is no capture. So the pacemaker system again fails. The third reason would be a lead problem would be a fracture. So sometimes it's common to have a fracture in the lead. So if you have a fracture, there is huge resistance, for the current to flow. So the resistance is measured by something called as an impedance of the lead. So whenever we program a pacemaker, we check what is the impedance of the lead. So impedance gives us a measure of what is the resistance to the flow of electrons across the lead. So suppose there's a fracture, there's a huge resistance. The electrons cannot pass this lead to reach the muscle. So what you realize is, again, the voltage generator doesn't reach the muscle because the lead is fractured, and the impedance is very, very high. And third, another lead problem would be a sensing problem. So, whatever electricity this voltage this battery generates should go through the lead alone and should exit from the tip. So whatever flow of electrons is should be exited from the tip. So suppose you have a sensing problem, and to make sure that it exits only through the tip, the entire lead is insulated. It has an insulation which makes sure that whatever electrons the battery generating comes through only the tip. Suppose you have an insulation failure, the surrounding insulation fails, then the electrons can easily exit out into the RA, into the RV. So, again, whatever electricity you're generating doesn't actually reach the tip, because the electrons find an easy way out. There's an insulation failure, so there's an easy way out, and there's no resistance to the flow of electrons. So in this case, again, you'll have battery depletion very early because the impedance drops down to a great extent. And that's another reason why a battery would deplete early and you would find a pacemaker problem. Final thing is if there's some problem with the muscle. So, if this area gets infarcted or something like that, the threshold might go up and whatever you've programmed might not be adequate. So these are some of the reasons and how to identify a pacing system failure. So just like with the single chamber pacemaker, this is a dual chamber pacemaker. So in a dual chamber pacemaker, we put in two leads, one into the right atrium and another into the right ventricle. Okay, so here the difference that you see in between a single chamber and a dual chamber pacemaker is, in a single chamber pacemaker, you're putting a lead only in the right ventricle. So it is giving pacing only to the right ventricle. So obviously the atrial events are dissociated from the ventricle events. Suppose this patient has a complete heart block and you're giving pacing only to the lower ventricle, then the atrial events are totally dissociated from the ventricle events. You will not find AV synchrony at all. So it's just giving ventricular pacing at all so that the patient doesn't syncope out. The basic difference in a dual chamber pacemaker is because you have two leads, this can sense the atrial events and that can be timed to the ventricle events. So, it will sense an atrial event, either an intrinsic atrial beat or a paced atrial beat, and based on that, it can time it to the ventricle events after a set time interval of 120 milliseconds or 150 milliseconds. It can pace the ventricle. So how do you differentiate a dual chamber from a single chamber ECG is, in a dual chamber pacemaker, there's always synchrony. So you'll find the atrial events being linked to the ventricle events. So in a post-pacing ECG, if you see that the atrial events or the P waves are linked to the QRS complex, so you know that this patient has had a dual chamber pacemaker. Okay. So this is how a typical pacemaker lead looks like. So, when we see a paced ECG, we are looking at the following information. We would want to know whether it's a single chamber or a dual chamber pacing, and possibly the mode of pacing, whether it is VVI or DDD, etc. Okay, what is it programmed at? Second, we need to know obviously whether the pacemaker is working properly. Third, we need to know, if possible, the site of RV pacing. That it's more informative, doesn't do much, but it gives you that information can definitely be obtained. And fourth is probably diagnosing ischemia, whether this patient has ischemia. And fifth is sometimes to know the condition why this patient was implanted a pacemaker. So this much of information you can get from any pacing ECG. So 1 minute. Yeah. So, like I said, sensing and pacing are the two most important things a pacemaker should do. Okay. So, in a patient with a dual chamber pacemaker, so, if the intrinsic atrial activation and AV conduction is present, see, both are present, intrinsic atrial activation and AV conduction is present. So, you will see that no pacemaker activity is seen, despite the patient having a dual chamber pacemaker. If he's got intrinsic atrial activation and intrinsic AV node conduction, then the pacemaker has no role at all. It just acts as a backup device. So even though the patient has been implanted a pacemaker, you will not see any pacemaker activity on the ECG. So this is called as sensing the atria and sensing the ventricles, or it's called as A sense and V sense, sensing atria and sensing ventricle, or A sense and V sense. On the other hand, if the intrinsic atrial activation is absent, but AV conduction is intact, so this is a typical sinus node dysfunction patient. You've implanted a dual chamber pacemaker for a sinus node dysfunction. So this patient doesn't have atrial activity. His sinus rates are very, very low. So he doesn't have atrial activity. But because his AV node is normal, his AV conduction is intact. So this patient, when you see his ECG, you will be expecting atrial pacing and ventricular sensing. So you'll have an atrial pacing and ventricular sensing. Because his atria is not functioning, the pacemaker will give current to the upper chambers. But because the AV conduction is intact, it will sense an intact AV conduction and will not give a ventricular impulse. So when you see this patient's ECG, you will have atrial pacing and ventricular sensing. So it's called as AP and VS because the ventricular activation in this patient is intrinsic. Suppose atrial activation is intact but no AV conduction. So this is a typical CHB patient. In a complete heart block patient, you will have good atrial activation, intrinsic atrial activation. Sinus rates will be 90, 100 and all that, but they will not have AV conduction. So in these patients, the atrial lead will only be sensing because it has got intrinsic atrial activity, but the ventricular lead will be giving pacing. So here you will have a backup ventricular pacing timed to the atrial event. So what you'll realize is because this patient has got a dual chamber pacemaker, he's got a complete heart block, there will be ventricular pacing, but this ventricular pacing will be timed to the atrial event. So that is called as atrial sensing because it's sensing the atria, and timed ventricular pacing. Suppose the patient has got a pan-conduction disease like sinus node dysfunction plus AV node dysfunction, then obviously he will require pacing in the atria and in the ventricle. So he will require atrial pacing and backup ventricular pacing. So you'll have AP plus AP and VP both. So based on the requirement, the pacemaker senses the intrinsic activation, and if the intrinsic activation is present, it doesn't do anything. If the intrinsic activation is absent, it paces. So based on the combination, in sinus node dysfunction, it paces the atria and usually senses the ventricle. So it's called as APVS. In complete heart block, it senses the atria and paces the ventricle. So it's called as ASVP. If there is a pan-conduction disease, it paces the atria and paces the ventricle. This brings us to another very interesting point. Sometimes we get questions from PGs and all that saying that, you have set the pacemaker at 60 beats per minute or 80 beats per minute. Why is the pacemaker ECG showing a heart rate of 90 or 100? How is it possible that in a patient with a bradyarrhythmia, you put in a pacemaker and on follow-up, his heart rate is above the basic set rate? That is possible in conditions like in CHB, in complete heart block, or if you have a rate responsive pacemaker. In complete heart block or in a rate responsive pacemaker, more so in complete heart block, when the sinus node is normal, the heart rate is driven by the intrinsic activation. So, every sinus beat is being tracked to the ventricle. So if the patient's sinus rate is 70, but he's got a complete heart block, all 70 beats are tracked to the ventricle. So irrespective of what you program in the lower rate, his heart rate will be his intrinsic sinus rate. So similarly, if he's walking a little bit, his sinus rate goes up to 80, 90 or 100. All these 100 impulses will be tracked and paced to the ventricle. So in patients with complete heart block, although you've put in a pacemaker, the heart rate may be more than the set ventricular rate, set pacemaker rate. This is also true in patients with rate responsive pacemakers. When they're doing some activity, if you take an ECG during that time, you put a Holter and make them do an activity, you'll find that the heart rate is more than what the basic rate is set. Okay, so this I've already gone through. So with that knowledge, let's try this ECG. I just need, this is not a poll. This is just you can let me know your answers via chat. What do you think about this ECG? Okay, so what information can you get from this pacing ECG? Is it single or dual? Is it rate? What is the rate? What is the type of pacing? Is it apical or outflow tract pacing? Is it working well? And is it pacing or sensing well? So you can let me know by chat probably. What you think about this. So we'll take a good 30 seconds to see this, okay? So I'm just waiting for a few answers just to see how much you can understand from this. So, just have a look at this ECG and see what information can you get from this ECG. Do you think it's a single chamber pacemaker, dual chamber pacemaker? What condition was it put for? And, what is the rate set at? And what is the kind of pacing? Is it an outflow tract pacing or an inflow tract pacing or an apical pacing? What information can you get? Just let me see if you can answer some of these questions. So we'll just wait for 1 minute with this ECG.
There's one reply telling VVI.
Okay.
Single chamber apical, good sensing pacing.
Okay.
Another is AF VVI, ventricular paced, rate 55, RV apex pacing. Rest is like good sensing pacing, single chamber, apical pacing, ventricular pacing for sinus node disease, RV apex, single chamber heart rate 60, good sensing, good pacing.
So we're getting a good of interesting answers, and most of them are right. I'm happy to see that most of them are attempting, and most of them got it right also. So if we have to look at this ECG, obviously you can see pacing spikes. Okay, so this is another interesting thing. I'll talk about unipolar and bipolar spikes later. So you see good pacing spikes. So and then the spike interval, the difference between two spikes is around 5 squares. That's around 60 beats per minute. So this pacemaker has been set at 60 beats per minute. You see that you see only ventricular events. You don't see timed atrial events at all. There is no AV synchrony here. So the very fact that you don't see AV synchrony, you don't see P waves linked to the ventricle events. You are pretty sure that this is a ventricle only pacing. So this patient has undergone a single chamber pacemaker. Now where is this pacemaker put? Because it's put in the RV, which all pacemakers are inserted in the RV. You will get a left bundle branch block like morphology like this. So you'll get typically in any pacemaker ECG, if you see, you'll find an LBEB because the pacing lead is in the right ventricle. Unless the patient has undergone a CRT or a his bundle pacing, generally in traditional pacing is a right ventricular pacing. So you'll find because it's in the right ventricle, it captures the right ventricle first and creates an LBEB like pattern. Okay, so you'll find an LBEB like pattern in all paced ECGs. Another thing is where in the right ventricle. So whether it's in the outflow tract or in the apex, these are the two common positions for traditional RV pacing. So if it's in the apex, you will find 2-3 AVF, more deep S waves or Q waves, deep S waves and small R waves. If the R waves are bigger than S waves or 2-3 AVF is upright, just like in RVO TVT, if 2-3 AVF is upright, then most likely this pacing lead is in the outflow tract. So here, if you see 2-3 AVF is upright and 1 AVL is negative, so most likely this is near the outflow tract. So that information you get. So the rate, the pacing, the mode. It's a VVI mode, and the rate, and where in is right ventricle outflow tract. What other information can you get? So I got one very interesting answer saying that this could be for an atrial fibrillation because obviously the gentleman doesn't see any P waves. Yes, at first look, this looks like atrial fibrillation because you don't see distinct P waves. But on closer look, if you see here, you'll have small, tiny retrograde P waves here and here in lead 3. So there are retrograde P waves. So, it's very common to find retrograde P waves in paced patients, especially. So this patient, most likely has a sinus node dysfunction. And I'll tell you why, nobody gave me that answer of sinus node dysfunction except for one person who said it was AF. So, this patient likely has a sinus node dysfunction because, this is a single chamber pacing all right. But if this patient had a complete heart block, you should have seen sinus beats. You should have seen intrinsic sinus beats. You should have seen P waves at a rate of around 70 to 80. You're not seeing any P waves at all. So, it's unlikely that he's having this normal sinus node. Second, what you see is these retrograde P waves, and they're very, very small. So most likely, these ventricular events are conducted retrogradely to the atria, and that is causing these small inverted P waves. So most likely this patient has a sinus node dysfunction, with single chamber ventricular pacing, which is conducted retrogradely to the atria. And I told you the reason why I think it is sinus node dysfunction, because if this patient had a complete heart block and a single chamber pacemaker, he would have a lot of P waves, and those P waves would be easily seen. Since you're not seeing significant P waves and you're actually seeing the P waves secondary to ventricular pacing, likely this patient has a sinus node dysfunction. So, see so much of information you can get from this pacing ECG. Another thing you can see is, yes, this has been probably programmed in unipolar mode because the spikes are huge. So generally, if the pacing spikes are huge, the pacemaker has been programmed to unipolar mode. And if the spikes are small, it's generally that the pacemaker has been programmed to bipolar mode. So good first try. A lot of people got it right. I'm very happy about it. Okay. What about this? So 65-year-old gentleman post-pacemaker ECG. So what do you think this is happening? So, what is happening here? So this is not a poll question again. So, but, just let me know your thoughts through chat. So what do you think about this? What is happening here? So we do not know the indication for this gentleman. Why was it? And, this is the ECG, comes on follow-up after 6 months, and this is ECG. What are your first thoughts? So is it a dual chamber pacemaker? Is he having completely intrinsic activation? Is it pacing or not? So
Yes.
someone says intrinsic
yes,
activity.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So many are saying that there's no pacemaker spikes. Yes, backup sensing. So that means he's saying that there's intrinsic activity, intrinsic rhythm, ASVS. Very good. Yes. So everyone agrees it's intrinsic activity, and the reason they're saying that is the reason they're saying that is because the pacing beats are very very narrow. But if you look carefully, I'll just zoom it, and you can see that these small spikes. You can see that you can see here, and you can see here spikes. So it's actually ventricular pacing. You can see the spikes very very small. So this is the thing. This is if you program the pacemaker, most pacemakers are programmed to bipolar modes, or bipolar leads, and then in a bipolar pacing, the pacing spike is really tiny. Another thing, so in unipolar pacing, you will see huge spikes like what you saw here. In bipolar pacing, you'll see the spikes which are really tiny. Another thing that can define the spikes or make them less visible is the filter settings. So, generally the spikes are very, very sharp. So if you have a low pass filter, which doesn't see the spikes, so you will generally miss the spikes out. So, if you don't see spikes, one reason might be the patient is having intrinsic activation. Another reason might be the patient is, programmed to a bipolar mode, which is very, very common. And third reason may be your abnormal filter settings. So, if the filter settings is the low pass filter is really low, 30 watt, 30 hertz or 40 hertz traditionally instead of the routine standard 100 hertz or something like that, you might not see the spikes. And the one reason why this patient looks like almost intrinsic rhythm, there's a point against intrinsic activation. You can see the pseudo delta like thing here. It's not rapid upslope in these leads. And I do agree, it's not wrong to mistake this patient as having intrinsic activation because the QRS complex is absolutely normal. So this is because the pacing lead has been put very, very close to the conduction system. This is likely to be a His bundle pacing where they have tried to capture the His bundle and paste there. So that's why, because it's direct His bundle pacing, the paced beats look absolutely normal. It's very easy to mistake it for intrinsic beats. The only giveaway to say this is a paced beat is a small pacemaker spikes. And you can see here again, like what I was saying, this is obviously a complete heart block now that you know, because he's having atrial sensing and ventricular pacing. So this patient likely had a complete heart block for which he underwent a His bundle pacing, and that's why you have ASVP. So here again, what I say, in complete heart block, the rate is driven by the upper chamber. The rate is driven by the atria. So this patient's atrial rate is 60 per minute. That's why his ECG is showing 60 beats per minute. Suppose you make this patient walk and then take an ECG, his atrial rate will be 80 per minute, and then his ventricular rate also will be 80 per minute. So in a pacemaker, especially for a complete heart block, the heart rate is driven by the atrial rate. So depending upon the atrial rate, you will have an heart rate on the ECG. So irrespective of what you set it. So sometimes PGs do ask us, we've set it at 60 per minute. Why is the heart rate 80? That's because the atria is sensing on its own, and this intrinsic atrial rate is much better than this. That's why you're having a rapid ventricular rate. So, I already talked to you about unipolar and bipolar spikes. So, in traditionally what, in unipolar spikes, the anode is here and the cathode is here. So the generator is a part of the system, and then you get a huge spike. In bipolar leads, you have a ring electrode and a tip electrode, and the current flows between these two, between the ring and tip electrode, and that generates a very small spike. So, most leads today are bipolar leads. Sometimes we do program into a unipolar configuration, but because most leads are bipolar leads, it's very, very difficult. Sometimes, you will find a spike, but it won't be a really significant spike. So in today's ECGs, don't go to look for, really big pacing spikes. Okay. So next, once we know how to,
Sir, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. There is a question, repeatedly too. What is the filter setting ideally for pacing spikes?
there is no filter setting for pacing spikes generally. If you see recommended ECG settings, so this is unfortunately this is standard across all ECG settings. So filters, there are there is two types of filters. I don't know how many of you have noticed this. Any ECG you take will have these two numbers. You should always look at these numbers in the bottom line. This is 005 and this is 40. This is the range between which the signals are interpreted by the ECG machine. This is called as a high pass filter. Anything above 0.05 hertz is allowed by the ECG, and anything less than 40 hertz, anything less than 40 is seen by the ECG. So anything more than 40 hertz is blinded by the ECG machine. That's called as a filter setting. So generally, you very sharp, rapid signals, like pacemaker spikes or QRS notches, etc., are high frequency signals. This QRS notches, J waves, and pacemaker spikes, etc., quantify as high frequency signals. So they usually are more than 40 hertz. So if your pacemaker setting, ECG setting is 40 hertz, you will miss all these signals, all these interesting things on the ECG. So American standard or any standardization says the low pass filter should be a minimum of 100 to 150 hertz, not 40 hertz. But unfortunately, most ECG machines today have 40 hertz as a low pass filter setting. This unfortunate. You can change this filter setting in your ECG. This 40 hertz is good for rhythm diagnosis, but it's not good for proper diagnosis of an ECG because you'll miss a lot of high frequency components. The reason why they've kept high pass filter is 0.05 is sometimes very low frequency signals, anything less than 0.05 is a very low frequency signal that comes as that which will signals which cause this interference is usually the breathing pattern of the patient. It's a low frequency signal. So if your filter setting is really low, then you'll have baseline artifact. The patient's breathing will create an artifact. You'll have a undulated baseline. You'll not have a static baseline. So all this, the patient's own breathing and this one, all those things will cause a low frequency artifact, and that's why you get sometimes in an ECG a drift. The line will not be straight. The line will be going like this. That's called as a drift artifact because it's speaking because your high frequency filter is set very, very low. It's picking up patient's own breathing and very other low frequency signals. So to make sure that the ECG is taken optimally, you need to have a good filter setting. So 0.005 is too less. What is you will find drift artifacts here. So what is standard is 0.5 to around 100 to 150, but the upper limit should be around 100 to 150. 40 is too low. You'll miss a lot of important high frequency components in the ECG. Okay. Yeah. So with that background, let's move to the next thing, identifying the mode. Okay. Okay. I don't have here. I'll just go through this. So what is happening here? So you can let me know your answers. What is happening here? What mode is this? So quick chat of maybe 15 to 20 seconds. What's happening here? Let me know what information you can get. Okay. So people are saying it's a VDD pacemaker. One fellow said it's a VVI, V pacing only. Yeah. So fantastic. This mode, CHB with VVI. This is fantastic. So most of you have got it right. So what you can see here is obviously you can see pacing spikes. So this is a paced ECG. And the pacing rate is around 60 beats per minute, around 5 squares. So this pacemaker has been set at 60 beats per minute. Next thing you want to know is whether there is AV synchrony. And you can see here that there is no AV synchrony at all. So here there's a P wave, here there's a P wave, here there's a P wave, here there's a P wave. And this AV relationship is varying, completely varying. Here the PR interval is very small, here the PR interval is very big. So obviously there is no AV synchrony. So that means this is a single chamber pacemaker and it's put in the RV. And the next reason is obviously this is a VVI mode. And the reason for putting this would be a complete heart block. Because you have good atrial activity, so this patient's sinus node is normal, but he's got no intrinsic ventricular activity at all. So, because he's got no intrinsic activity, you're having ventricular pacing. So this is likely to be a single chamber pacing set at 60 beats per minute. So it's a VVI mode. Okay, what about this ECG? We moved on to the second ECG. So what's happening here? What mode is this? So someone said AI mode, APVP, DDD, APACE and VSense. Yes. So we're getting good answers. We're getting correct answers here. So most of you got it right. So you can. This is a paced ECG again because you can see pacing spikes. So and the atrial chamber is being paced. So this is an atrial based pacing. Okay, so that means the atria definitely has a lead. Okay, so this could be a dual chamber system, or sometimes rarely we do, even in sinus node dysfunction we put a single lead instead of in sinus node dysfunction, because we know the intrinsic AV node conduction is normal. So sometimes we just put a lead into the atria, put a single chamber pacemaker into the atria, because we know the AV node conduction is normal. So this is an atrial based pacing system. So most likely in today's you wouldn't be wrong by saying this is a dual chamber pacemaker. And you can see atrial pacing. And here you can see atrial pacing, but intrinsic ventricular activation. So these QRS complexes are absolutely normal. It intrinsically activated because this patient has sinus node dysfunction and a normal AV node. You require pacing only in the atrial chamber, not in the ventricle. Whatever atrial paced impulses are there, they traverse the AV node normally and produce an intrinsic QRS complexes. So these QRS complexes are absolutely intrinsic and native. So you don't require ventricular pacing at all in this patient. So this is an APVS. So it's an atrial-based pacing, APVS. This could be a dual chamber pacemaker, but it could also be a single chamber atrial-based pacing. So you're pacing only the atria. What you see here is, here you can see, what rate you set will be the rate of this patient, because this is an atrial-based pacing. So here, this patient has sinus node dysfunction. His sinus rates cannot increase on his own. If this patient walks, his sinus rate is not going to increase to 80, 90 because he's got sinus node dysfunction. So in these patients, generally you see that the heart rate will be what you set, unless the patient you have put in a rate responsive pacemaker, wherein the heart rate may be programmed to increase when he walks about a little bit. Okay. So what's happening here? APVP, DDD. So everyone's become an expert now. I'm getting rapid answers. Everyone's answering properly. Absolutely fantastic. So, I think most of you are getting it, getting the hang of things as how to read ECGs. So, and I would like to have more information. So most of you are writing to me, it's APVP. What could be the underlying cause? Why this patient hasn't been implanted a pacemaker? So what could be the reason for pacing in this patient? Yes. So, see, all of you are getting the right answer. So obviously this is a pacing ECG. You have two spikes. You have an atrial spike and a ventricular spike. So obviously this patient is requiring atrial pacing and ventricular pacing. That means because he's requiring atrial pacing, he's got sinus node dysfunction. He's got no intrinsic sinus speech. And because he's requiring ventricular pacing, he's got AV node dysfunction, or else if he had an intact AV node, he wouldn't have required ventricular pacing. So it's got a pan conduction system disease, sinus and AV node dysfunction. And that's why you have atrial pacing and ventricular pacing. This is dual chamber pacemaker with, DDD mode with AP and VP. So that's the mode. Okay. So what about here? So ASVP, DDD pacemaker with ASVP, correct? Fantastic, DDD mode. See, all of you got it. You're getting it, whether it's VVI or DDD, you're going one step further to tell which chamber is being paced, which is being sensed, and what condition it is. Fantastic. So, rightly said, so you can see this is the paced ECG. You can see pacing spikes. These are bipolar pacing spikes. And you can see what I was telling the same thing. You can see that the atrial events are linked to the ventricular events here. So every atrial beat is linked to the ventricular event. So here there's a linking between the atria and ventricle. So definitely this patient has had a dual chamber pacemaker because the atrial events are linked to the ventricular events. So this is not a VVI. This is a dual chamber pacemaker because the atria is linked to the ventricle. And he's having intrinsic atrial activation. So his sinus node is absolutely normal, but he's having completely paced ventricles. So he's got an AV node disease. So this is a dual chamber pacemaker, DDD mode, implanted for a patient with an AV node disease with a complete heart block. So, and he's having AS and VP. So, so much of information you get from this basic pacing ECG. Okay. And probably this patient has an old Antrowal MI also. That's another information you can get. If you look at this V1 to V6, generally you don't see this thing, you don't see Q waves in V6 and all those things. So, even if you put in this is an inflow tract pacing, you see that 2-3 AVF is inverted as against the earlier ECGs, which we're seeing the 2-3 AVF is upright. So this is 2-3 AVF is inverted. That's an apical pacing. So sometimes in deep apex, you might get Q waves, or another reason would be that this patient has had, an old antrovolemai. That's why you're getting this Q waves in V1 to V6. But, you can't really go by that. You'll have to see an echo to correlate, because sometimes in, apical pacings, you might have Q waves till V6. Generally, what you would expect is a small R in V5 and V6, even in paced ECGs. So if you have a Q wave in V5, V6, maybe you might have to rule out an old anterior MI in this patient. Okay. Okay. Finally, is this pacemaker working well? This is a post pacemaker ECG. Is it working well? So he comes on follow up. Yes, I got 2 yes. So what is likely happening here? Why are you not seeing any pacemaker spike or any pacemaker activity? Yes, this is ASVS. Fantastic. See, that's what. So I told you, just because a patient has been implanted a pacemaker, you need not see pacemaker activity. You will see pacemaker activity only if there's an intrinsic conduction disturbance. So in that patient, if his sinus node is not working, you'll find sinus spikes. If his AV node is not working, you'll find ventricular beats, ventricular spikes. But if both are normal, if the AV conduction disease or the sinus disease is intermittent, you will, even though the patient has undergone a pacemaker, you will not find anything. So generally, the rule is, if a post-pacing ECG, the heart rate is normal, generally the pacemaker is set at 60. So anything around 60 or above 60, if the heart rate is normal or the ECG rate is normal, the pacemaker just might be lying dormant, just observing things. But if this patient's heart rate were to be 30 or 40, I would be worried. So if this patient had come to me post pacemaker after 8 years, and I would have seen this ECG, and if his heart rate would have been 40 instead of 60, I would be worried, because nobody programs a pacemaker at 40. You would have a backup rate of 60. So meaning to say that, nothing goes less than 60. Heart rate doesn't go less than 60. So, if he comes with a heart rate of 40 and I don't see spikes, I'll definitely be worried. But if he comes at a heart rate of 60 and I don't see spikes, I'll definitely not be worried, because I know that, he's having intrinsic conduction at that point of time. And that's why you're not seeing any pacemaker activity. Okay. Okay. So let's go to the wrong. What is wrong in this pacemaker? So what is happening here? So use little time. I am sure you'll get the answer. So this is a poll question. Deepak, this is a poll question. What is wrong with this pacemaker? Loss of output, loss of capture, oversensing, undersensing. So is it loss of output, loss of capture, oversensing, or undersensing? Deepak, I hope I'm audible.
I start the poll.
Yeah. Am I audible?
You are audible.
Yeah, fine.
You have got good responses. 90 people have responded.
Oh, I wish more people respond. So, but it's better than before, 145, no?
Yeah. 140 responded.
Fantastic.
Ten more seconds left. We have 190 responses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maximum.
Yeah.
Yeah, maximum is undersensing. And
Okay.
Loss of capture and oversensing are almost same.
Okay.
Very few of them having loss of output.
Okay, fine. Good. And I'm happy that at least the people who answered, most of them got it, have answered it undersensing. Let's see what's happening here. So you see this first beat, there is a spike and there is a capture. See, the options were, one is, I think, a loss of output. So, when you say loss of output, you're saying that there's a battery problem. So, because the battery generates the output. So, if there's a battery problem, it doesn't generate an output. So, how do you know that there is a battery problem? Is one, the spikes won't be there. These spikes represent battery activity. That means the battery is generating an output. Okay, so these spikes. So if these spikes are seen regularly at a good rate, that means the battery is functioning well. There is no loss of output. The moment the battery depletes, that there is, the battery depletes. So there is no output. That's when you say loss of output. You'll find that the spikes become infrequent. Okay, so here you're seeing regular spikes at around 60 bursts per minute. So obviously the battery is normal. It's generating spikes. But there's a difference between loss of output and capture. So, the battery's job is to generate a spike and to generate a voltage. That should capture the myocardium. So, this is a capture beat. So here you have a spike with the capture. So if this is loss of capture, here you find a spike, but there's no capture here. So in all these places. So here there's output, but there's no capture. Here there is output, but there is capture. So obviously what you see is the spikes are normal. So the battery is normal. And here you have capture, but sometimes you don't have capture. So the reason for loss of capture would be, that means capture is usually a problem of the lead. So suppose like I said, and output is a problem of the battery, capture is a problem of the lead. So suppose the battery generates enough output, but if the lead is not proper, so whatever output is generated won't be reaching to the ventricle and they will not be captured. So is this a lead problem? We do not know. What you should see is why this is not being captured. So there can be two reasons for loss of capture. Even though a battery generates an output, that output might not be capturing for three reasons, not two. One, the voltage might be very little. It might be sub-threshold. So if the minimum voltage is 1.5, if the battery is generating an output of only 1 volt, so obviously it's sub-threshold output. Even though you have an output, it's not going to capture. But this is not the case here. Second reason would be there's a lead problem. The lead has fractured or something like that. So whatever output is being generated is not reaching the ventricle. That's why there's no capture. And the third reason might be both are normal. Still there is no capture because you're putting the output is reaching the ventricle during the refractory period. So the ventricle output will capture the ventricle only when the ventricle is not refractory. So suppose the output falls on the ventricle during the refractory period, obviously it's not going to capture. If you look at this, the spike is falling on the QRS. So obviously the ventricle is refractory. Here again it's falling on the QRS. The ventricle already has an intrinsic activation, so it's refractory to anything else. So the ventricle is having its own intrinsic activation. So a pacing spike at this point will find the ventricle refractory and is not going to make any difference to it. Here also it's falling on the ST segment, it's refractory. Here it's falling on the T wave, again it's a refractory period. This entire thing is refractory period of the ventricle. So from the QRS to T waves. So all these spikes are falling on the refractory periods, and that's why they're not capturing. The only spike which does not fall on the refractory period is captured here. So here you find that the spike is falling in the not refractory period when the ventricle is completely normal. So at that point of time, if a spike falls, it is capturing. But if a spike falls during the refractory period, it is not going to capture at all. So this is why this is happening, because this is not sensing the ventricle. I told you here, what you realize is the output is normal, the lead is normal, the capture is normal. Then the problem is it is not sensing an intrinsic activation. So here I told you the pacemaker's function is backup. So only when there is no intrinsic activity, the pacemaker should fire. So here there is intrinsic activity. Then there is no role for this pacemaker to produce an output. So this pacemaker is obviously not seeing an intrinsic activity. It is under sensing. So this is where the sensing function is important. Here, because there is intrinsic activity, the pacemaker should have just kept quiet and not done anything. But because it's under sensing, it is not recognizing any intrinsic activity. It is throwing an output. Unfortunately, that output is falling during the refractory period, and that's why you're not having any capture. This is really dangerous because this output, if it falls on the T wave, can result in an R on T. So if this falls on the T wave or somewhere like that, it can result in an R on T. This looks like this patient has been programmed to an asynchronous mode. In an asynchronous mode, the pacemaker is completely blinded to sensing. It just keeps on pacing, irrespective of the sensing function. So sometimes we program the pacemaker to an asynchronous mode. Like when the patient is undergoing a surgery or something like that, because cautery can interfere with the pacemaker, we want to shut off its sensing function. So in such cases, we remove the sensing function, switch off the sensing, and just put it in an asynchronous. Some disturbance here. Yeah, in an asynchronous mode, the pacemaker just keeps on pacing without any sensing. Okay, so obviously the reason here would be under sensing. In over sensing, what happens is the pacemaker sees activity which is not there and stops pacing. So generally, oversensing presents in the ECG as a bradycardia because its pacemaker senses something with an event which is not actually there and it fails to produce a spike. So an oversensing ECG should be suspected when you have a bradycardia in a pacemaker patient. Okay. So loss of output would mean less spikes. Loss of capture, you will have spikes, but without complexes, without QRS complexes. Oversensing means, this undersensing means unnecessary pacing. Oversensing means loss of pacing. The page speaker fails to produce a pacing spike when actually it is required because it's sensing something different. Okay, so what is wrong with this ECG? You can chat the answers to me. What is wrong here? Is this loss of capture, loss of output, or an oversensing or an undersensing problem?
Responses are loss of capture.
Yeah, so a lot of people are saying loss of capture. So I'm getting a lot of saying loss of capture. Yes, good, partly right. So let's see the thing. This is a paced ECG, obviously. But if you see the pacing, this is the first pacing spike which is produced, so this output is there. It produces a capture. So there is a capture. There's output and capture. Okay, then this is the next pacing spike which is coming after 4 squares, 75 beats per minute, which should have produced a capture. Unfortunately, for some reason, it's not producing a capture. So, that means, maybe a lead problem that it's not producing a capture. But next, what you see is the next pacing spike is coming at, after 6 squares. So this is less than 50 beats per minute. So, the pacing spikes are irregular. You have after 6 squares. Here, okay, there's a reason for not having a pacing spike because there's an intrinsic activity. Here, there's a pacing spike, and then you have 4 squares. Then again, you have after 6 squares, a pacing spike. So the pacing spikes are not consistent. They are not at a set rate. Pacing spikes are occurring at 75 and 50 beats per minute alternately. So sometimes you have it at 75, sometimes at 60. So obviously there's a problem with the output. That means the battery seems to be at fault. So it's not pacing regularly. It's not producing spikes regularly. If the battery was normal, it should have regularly produced spikes. So here at 75, it should have produced a spike at 75 here, somewhere here. For some reason, it's not producing a spike here, and it's producing a spike here at around 50. So and this pattern seems consistent. Sometimes at 50, sometimes at 75. It's not consistent. So obviously, I would suspect a battery problem here, that the battery is depleted. So as I told you, when the battery is depleted, the output becomes irregular. It doesn't be 70 or 60. It will become very, very less. It may become 50, 40, and irregular. So when the output is less, suppose you have a battery problem, if it cannot generate a voltage, then obviously the voltage will be substandard to produce a capture. So even in, you will have a loss of capture in a lead problem, also in a battery problem. So if the battery doesn't generate an output, doesn't generate enough threshold, enough voltage, you're not going to have a capture. So that's why you have loss of capture. Loss of capture is absolutely right. But the loss of capture here might be because of a battery problem. So you're seeing more into it. You're not seeing loss of capture could mean there's a lead problem or a battery problem. In a lead problem, because the lead doesn't allow the current to flow across it to the ventricle. In a battery problem, because the lead is normal, but the battery doesn't generate enough voltage for it to generate a capture. So here, the loss of capture seems to be secondary to a battery depletion here because the rate is irregular, and that's why there's loss of capture. And what you realize is, and the capture is intermittent. Sometimes you have capture, sometimes you have no capture. What you realize is this patient has a complete heart block, and because the pacing system failed, he's got an intrinsic escape rhythm, which is very, very slow. And this is the dangerous part, the QT interval. I was stressing this several times in my earlier presentations also. Complete heart block is a very dangerous condition. So you can see here in the intrinsic beat, the QT is more than 800 to 900 milliseconds. So suddenly you have bradycardia-induced QT prolongation, and this patient, the next moment, will throw an ectopic R1T and develop a VF. So these things are very, very important. Bradycardia is really dangerous because not because of the rates, it's mainly because of the QT interval. Suddenly a prolonged QT can trigger off an R1T and a VF. Okay, so here, obviously the correct answer is loss of capture, probably because of a battery depletion. So what's happening here? So another paced ECG. So this is one of the reasons, sometimes you see this paced patient having a heart program. So what is likely happening here? Pacemaker mediated tachycardia. I'm getting a few. Pacemaker mediated loss of output. No. ASBP with exercise. Okay. Patient is exercising. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Upper rate behavior, over sensing. See, yeah, obviously. So the thing is, this patient has got an ASBP at a rate of around 75 per minute. Here you have an atrial ectopic, and then that triggers off a tachycardia. So this is obviously, and see, atrial tachycardia. So the differential diagnosis. I told you the same thing. No, see, a rate more than what is programmed may be because of a rate responsive pacemaker, maybe because of increased sinus rate, or maybe an atrial arrhythmia. It could be a true atrial arrhythmia, or rarely it can be a pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. So if the patient is having an atrial arrhythmia, atrial tachycardia, which is running at 120, 130 beats per minute, and if he's got a complete heart block, all the 130 beats will be tracked to the ventricle. So that is one of the reasons. Second thing could be a pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. In pacemaker-mediated tachycardia, what happens is you have retrograde VA conduction. So a retrograde impulse, this could be a retrograde A. So a retrograde impulse is sensed by the atria and then tracked to the ventricle. So and then that produces a V pace beat that again produces a retrograde impulse and which is tracked to the ventricle. So you have the pacemaker acts as an antegrade limb of the tachycardia. So every retrograde A is conducted to the ventricle. This usually happens after a ventricular ectopic. So suppose you have a ventricular ectopic, you will have it conducted to the atria and that is tracked to the ventricle. That again is conducted to the atria, tracked to the ventricle. So you have ASVP, and that produces a pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. The clue to identifying pacemaker-mediated tachycardia is the tachycardia occurs at upper rate behavior. So upper rate is something what you should understand. So I told you that in dual chamber pacemakers, based on the intrinsic sinus rates, the ventricular rate will be decided. But there should be a maximum to this. If the sinus rate goes to around 180, 190, not sinus rate, if the patient develops an atrial tachycardia and the atrial rate goes to around 180, 190, you do not want all those atrial impulses to be conducted to the ventricle. So, if all those impulses are conducted to the ventricle, you have a ventricular rate of 180, 190, which is bad. So there's a limit. So that's called as an upper rate. So only even if the patient is developing an atrial arrhythmia or a sinus tachycardia or something like that, pacemakers have an upper rate which is set, which can be modified. So around 120 to 130. So only heart rate up to 120 to 130 will be tracked to the ventricle. Beyond that, will start ventrivating, or suddenly you'll have 2:1 behavior. Okay, so basically only up to 130 is tracked to the ventricle. The clue to identifying pacemaker-mediated tachycardia is the ventricular rate will be exactly like the upper rate. It will be around 130. So the moment you see this, you see that the heart rate is around 130. There is a chance that this is a pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. The only way to confirm it is by seeing, device interrogation, by seeing atrial activity and ventricular activity, by seeing how many atrial activity is there and how many ventricular activity is there. So by ECG, you can only suspect it, that this is a pacemaker-mediated arrhythmia, most likely a pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. Differential diagnosis will be an atrial arrhythmia tracking to the ventricle. But because it's completely irregular, I would go in favor of a pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. Okay. So, this, I think I already answered this. The following can explain a heart rate of more than 80 in a paced ECG. Tracking of intrinsic sinus rate, yes. Atrial tracking of sinus or atrial arrhythmia, yes. Pacemaker-mediated tachycardia, yes. DDDR or AIR mode. So all these things can cause a heart rate of more than 80 in a paced ECGs. Okay. So coming back to the poll question. So let's see how many of you will answer this right this time. So what is the answer here? So the options were loss of output A. B is I think okay. I think we forgot the poll on this. Now okay, we can go back to the first poll again. We can do it again. Deepak.
Yes, we can do that. We can do
Sir,
that.
just-
Dr. Sudhakar.
Yeah.
Sir, just 1 second, sir.
Yeah. I think I just have a couple of ECGs and then we'll close. Okay.
Yeah. Is this the question, sir? What is wrong with this pacemaker?
Yeah. Show me the poll result. This one options.
Loss of output, loss of capture.
Can you display it? We'll put the poll.
Oh, yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's come.
Yeah.
So what is wrong with this pacemaker? Loss of output, loss of capture, oversensing, or undersensing? So we're getting some replies, Deepak?
Yeah, we are getting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We have
Okay,
120
good.
replies.
Good. Hopefully we'll get more than that.
Yes.
Okay, shall we get the poll results?
Yes. So total of yeah, Dr. Sudha, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Total of the maximum is under sensing,
Can
94
you
people.
display it? Can you display it? Display it?
Yeah, just 1 second, sir. Yeah, I'll do
Yeah.
it. You can see that.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic. See, most of you got it right this time. I'm still unhappy that 187 did not answer after all this. But still, among those who answered, I think the same people are answering again. But most of you got it right. It's under sensing. So you can see here, no? So, there is a pacing spike. So obviously the battery seems okay. The pacing output is 60. So the battery seems okay. So there's no loss of output. It's generating an output. Second, there's loss of capture. Yes, intermittently. Here there is capture, but here there is no loss of capture. So the reason for loss of capture, one, may be inadequate output. That is not the case here. Second, may be a lead problem. Or third, may be that the capture is occurring on the physiological refractory period. And that's why there's no capture. So here you can see that, it's falling on the QRS complex on the T waves. So whenever an output falls on the QRS complex and the T waves, you're not expecting capture because that is the refractory period of the ventricle. But when it falls outside the QRS complex, you're expecting a capture. So here, more likely it is falling, there's loss of capture is because it's falling on the refractory period. And that is unfortunate because the pacemaker is supposed to see this intrinsic activity and stop pacing. And the reason it is not doing that is because it's not sensing this. It's under sensing this intrinsic activity, and that's why it's pacing it. So obviously, this is an under sensing problem. This could be that the pacemaker has been programmed to asynchronous mode, or this one. This is unlikely to be magnet. I saw an answer on magnet. What will happen is when you put a magnet on a pacemaker, it is true that it will go into an asynchronous mode, but it will go to a magnet rate, which is much faster than the set heart rate of 60. So whenever you put a earlier, not so commonly now, whenever a pacemaker patient comes, you would put a magnet on that. What a magnet does is it suspends intrinsic sensing activity. So there's no sensing. It goes into an asynchronous mode. But what you will realize the magnet rate, and the magnet rate is much different from the set rate. So each pacemaker has its own magnet rate. Generally, it's around 90, 98 or 99 or something like that when the battery is good. And when the battery drops down, the magnet rate reduces to around 65 or 75 or 70 or something. Based on the pacemaker, it is different. So obviously, this is not a magnet rate. This is most likely an asynchronous mode which is being programmed in a patient or a pacemaker. This one, what under sensing. As I told you, oversensing cannot be this. In oversensing, you will find that pacemaker is not doing its job when it's supposed to. Okay. So what is the abnormality here? So this is my last ECG. Then we have a couple of slides on ischemia, and then we'll close. Well, what is the abnormality here? So I'm getting some answers over sensing. Only 2 people answered over sensing. Hysteresis, over sensing. Yes, I think we're heading the right direction. So you can see here, there is output, there is capture. But here, there is no output, no capture. Reason, it could be a battery problem, that there is no output, the battery doesn't generate an output at all. Or reason that it's sensing something somewhere here. The output is supposed to come here. Maybe it's over-sensing something. The patient has got atrial fibrillation. The ventricular lead is over-sensing something. And whenever it senses something, what the pacemaker thinks is there's some intrinsic activity. It oversenses an atrial event. In this case, it's oversensing an atrial event. It is the ventricular lead is oversensing an atrial event and thinking that there's an intrinsic ventricular activity, and that inhibits pacing. So this could be oversensing, and here you can see that there's an output, there's a capture. Again, this output is capture, and consistently at a rate of around 75, there's output and capture. So it doesn't look like a battery issue here. If there was a battery issue, the spikes would have been really irregular, would have been less than 50 or 40 beats per minute. And, that would mean that, there's a loss of output. But here, because you're seeing consistent output and consistent capture, looks like only in this point it is missed, and looks like it is oversensing an atrial event. The ventricular lead is oversensing an atrial event, and that's why there is loss of loss of pacing here. So this is what I was trying to say. Oversensing should be suspected when you have bradycardia or when the pacemaker is not firing when it's supposed to fire. So here you're expecting a pacemaker firing. When it's not firing when it's supposed to fire, you think that one reason could be that the battery is depleted, or the other reason is it is oversensing something. And common causes for oversensing would be atrial events, myopotentials, or external impulses. Okay. So, finally coming to the last topic, paced ECG and ischemia. It's one of the most difficult things to do. You have to use Garbos's criteria. So, ST depression in precordial leads and, significant ST depression or ST elevation concordant more than 1 mm or discordant more than 5 mm, just like what you use for routine LBEP, is what you use for, ischemia and is in pacemaker patients. But, the sensitivity and specificity of pacemaker ECG, diagnosing ischemia and paced ECG is very, very poor. You would go with clinical symptoms and with biomarkers and with echo before diagnosing and confirming ischemia. So, otherwise, just based on diagnosing ischemia in a pacing ECG is going to be really poor unless you have collaborative lab evidence or anything like that. So, some of the examples would be this ST depression in precordial leads. So, if the patient has got chest pain and is come with this precordial leads, ST depression V1, V2, V3, or an ST elevation like this, so then you definitely consider ischemia. But as I said again and again, you would want enzymes and echo in many patients to diagnose confirm ischemia in pacemaker ECGs. Okay, that's all. Thank you. If there are a few questions, we'll take some. Deepak?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
A few questions like, please can explain what is threshold and sensitivity.
Because, yeah.
Deepak, you carry on. You tell.
Audible?
You tell, Deepak. You can tell the question.
Yeah, there was one question: how electrolytes impact the pacemaker function?
Yeah, I mean, electrolytes can definitely, drugs and electrolytes can vary the threshold. So generally what happens is on table when we are implanting a pacemaker, we check the pacemaker threshold. So what is the minimum amount of output required to capture?
So the question, one of the question was how electrolyte will impact the pacemaker function.
Electrolytes will vary the threshold. So, suppose the patient has got hyperkalemia, the threshold might rise. So, in patients, in post-pacemaker patient who becomes sick and, develops hyperkalemia or some other reason for something, they can vary the thresholds of the pacemaker. So, what was initially capturing at 1.5 might now capture at 2. So, generally, for this reason, we generally the pacemaker that programmed at an output which is much more than, which is almost twice that of the threshold. So on table, you check the threshold at what minimum output the ventricle captures. That is called the threshold voltage, the minimum voltage required to generate a ventricular capture. So, and the pacemaker is programmed to more than twice the threshold output. Okay, so if the output is, the threshold is 1.5, we program the pacemaker around 2.2, 2.5 or 3. Okay, not less than that, just to keep a safety margin of around twice. Yes.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next question: what is the threshold and sensitivity? They want to know what is threshold and what is sensitivity.
I think I answered what is threshold.
Yes,
same
sir.
thing. Sensitivity is the same parameter as beyond what so some again the sensitivity setting. Like what you want to do in sensitivity is make sure that the pacemaker picks up intrinsic event, but you can't set a very low sensitivity margin, because if the sensitivity is too low that you pick up any event in the heart, then it might oversense an atrial event. So, so that's why there is a sensitivity cutoff, which varies based on the atrium and ventricle. So in ventricle, generally, you want, when you're putting a lead, you want anything more than 5, and R wave, we say sensitivity, R wave more than 5. So if on implantation, if the R wave is less than 5, that means there is a likelihood that the pacemaker might not pick up an intrinsic atrial event, but intrinsic ventricular event. But on table, if the R waves are 8 or 10 or 11, you know that your pacemaker has got good sensitivity because it's picking up good R waves. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Is one question like will the amplitude of pacemaker spike change in a situation with low battery?
No, the spike amplitude won't change, but obviously the number of spikes would change. The amplitude, no, that's not. Okay. So the number of spikes would change and the capture would change, definitely. Anything else?
Does lead fracture cause absence of pacemaker spike?
See, if the lead is not touching the ventricle at all, obviously you will not have a pacemaker spikes at all, because the spikes are seen only when it touches the ventricle. So if the lead is free floating, yes, but an intermittent lead fracture will not produce pacemaker spikes. If the system is intact, you might get a spike, but you might not get a capture. Okay. Yes. Anything else?
Somebody asked, can we do treadmill on a paced ECG?
On a pacemaker?
Yeah.
Generally, what we do is, if you need to do a treadmill, you need to check on his upper tracking rate, because you have to make sure. Suppose you're putting a patient on a treadmill, you have to make sure his upper tracking rate is 150, 160, and not 130. Because if you put a routine pacemaker patient on a treadmill, once his atrial rate goes to around 130, he'll start venkibacking, or even worse, he might go into 2:1 conduction. So heart rate will suddenly drop down, which is not advisable. So what we do is, as a part of exercise tolerance for pacemaker patients, we ask them, based on their activity, you can adjust the upper tracking rate. In really old people, you keep an upper tracking rate of 120. That's maximum that they require. In younger people, you can keep an upper tracking rate for 130, 140, so that most exercises, when the heart rate goes up to 130, 140, you're okay. So even if the post-pacemaker patient is undergoing a treadmill, we tell them that do a treadmill till your heart rate goes up to 120, 130. Don't go beyond that, because if you do a treadmill very, very rigorously, and if your heart rate goes to 150, suddenly your heart rate might drop because it stopped tracking. So we advise these pacemaker patients to do graded exercises with a target heart rate, to make sure your target heart rate is less than the upper tracking rate. Okay, because suddenly you will not capture. Okay.
I think one last person will take, sir. Can you explain the concept of hysteresis?
Hysteresis is a thing like, to encourage intrinsic activation. So generally you have two rates in a pacemaker, especially in a single chamber pacemaker. You have a basic rate, which is set at 60. So, that is the difference between two paced intervals. So after a paced interval, between the next paced interval, there will be a basic rate of 60 beats per minute. But suppose, what if the patient has an intrinsic activation? So you have a ventricular paced event, and before the next ventricular paced event occurs, if there's an intrinsic ventricular complex, there is some intrinsic activity. And I told you that the pacemaker's main function is to make sure that you give only backup pacing when pacing is not required. So suppose there's an intrinsic ventricular activation. After that intrinsic ventricular activation, the pacemaker will wait longer before it starts a paced event. So that is called as hysteresis. The hysteresis rate would be 50 generally. So normally, if there is no intrinsic activation, if there's a ventricular paced event, it will wait for 60 till 60 beats per minute. That is 1000 milliseconds before it can pace again. But suppose after a ventricular paced event, you find some intrinsic activity. Now there is some intrinsic activity. So you encourage intrinsic activity by waiting longer. So the pacemaker would wait, instead of 1000 milliseconds, it would wait for 1200 milliseconds. That is 50 beats per minute. So as to encourage any intrinsic activity and wait. So that is called as a hysteresis rate, which is lower than the set basic rate. I hope I'm clear.
Yes, sir. I think that's all, sir. These are the...
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you, Dr. Manish. That was very from the basics. The explanation was very well. I think all the participants were having a very good understanding of the basic ECG, paced ECG interpretation now. And there was very good crowd. I would thank all the crowd for being present here and being a part of this meeting. We will be coming back with more sessions. You will be getting an invite and all. Just share your feedback about the session so that we can improve further. Thank you, Dr. Manish.
Thank you, Sudhakar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Manish, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Sudhakar, for being there and posting all the poll questions and all. Your presence was really valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you.